In the heart of the snow-covered mountains of Japan, where the winds howled and the world seemed to be swallowed by ice, there lived a woman whose existence was shrouded in mystery. The villagers at the base of the mountains whispered her name in awe and fear. Yama Yurei, the spirit of the mountains. Her beauty was unparalleled, but it was not her grace or her ethereal presence that made her a figure of legend. It was her hair, long, flowing, and made entirely of ice. In the moonlight, her frozen locks glistened like the stars, shimmering as though they had been woven from the very essence of winter itself. The story of Yama Yurei had been told for generations, but only a few knew the truth behind the myth. She was not born of the earth like other mortals. Long ago, when the world was still young and the gods walked among men, Yama Yurei had been created by the mountain gods. Her purpose was singular: to guard the world against the darkness that dwelled in the deepest recesses of the earth. These dark forces had long sought to escape their prison and cover the land in eternal night, and only the power of the ice could contain them. Yama Yurei's home was said to be high up on the tallest peak of the mountains, a place so cold and treacherous that no human could ever reach it. There, she resided in a palace made of ice, its walls clear as glass, reflecting the light of the stars and the pale moon. The palace was said to have no doors, no windows, only endless corridors of frozen beauty. It was from here that Yama Yurei watched over the land, ever vigilant against the encroaching darkness. It was said that her hair, the source of her power, was not merely ice, but the crystallized breath of the gods themselves. With a single strand, she could freeze entire rivers, and with a mere gesture, she could call forth blizzards that swept across the land. Yet, despite her power, Yama Yurei was not a being of cruelty or vengeance. She wielded her icy strength with grace, her actions always measured and purposeful. For Yama Yurei's battle was not against the living, but against the shadows that threatened to consume all life. Every night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world was plunged into darkness, Yama Yurei descended from her icy palace. The villagers spoke of how, just as the last rays of daylight faded, a cold breeze would sweep through the valleys, a sign that Yama Yurei had begun her nightly vigil. Wrapped in a cloak of frost, her icy hair trailing behind her, she would walk the length of the mountains, her presence unseen but felt in the cold bite of the wind and the silent fall of snow. But Yama Yurei's journey was not one of peace. For in the deepest valleys, where the light of the sun never reached, there lay the ancient prison of the dark creatures, beings older than time itself. These creatures, born from the primordial chaos of the earth, had long been sealed away by the gods, their power too great and their malice too pure to be allowed to roam free. Yet as the centuries passed, the prison weakened, and each night, the creatures would claw at the edges of their confinement, seeking to break free and spread their darkness across the world. It was Yama Yurei's duty to keep them at bay. As she walked the valleys, the darkness would rise to meet her. The creatures, formless and shifting, appeared as shadows on the snow, moving like liquid night. Their touch could wither life. Their presence could drain the warmth from the earth. But Yama Yurei, with her icy gaze and frozen hair, was their eternal foe. With a flick of her hand, she would send a gust of frigid wind, freezing the creatures in place, their dark forms turning to brittle ice. Yet, for every shadow she froze, another would rise in its place, for the darkness was endless, and her battle was eternal. The villagers, though fearful of the night, knew that as long as Yama Yurei walked the mountains, they would be safe. They left offerings at the base of the mountain, hoping to gain her favor. Small shrines were built in her honor, adorned with candles that flickered in the cold wind. It was said that if the candles remained lit through the night, Yama Yurei had passed through and fought the darkness nearby. But Yama Yurei's battle was not without cost. Though she was a creation of the gods, her power was tied to the world itself. The more she fought, the more the ice spread, and with each passing year, the winters grew longer and harsher. The villagers began to wonder if, one day, the ice would cover the entire world, trapping them all in an endless winter. Yet, they could not turn against their protector, for without Yama Yurei, the darkness would surely consume them. One particularly harsh winter, the cold came earlier than usual. The snow fell heavier, and the winds howled with a fury unlike any the villagers had ever known. They huddled in their homes, fearing that the darkness had grown too strong and that Yama Yurei had finally been defeated. For weeks, the sky remained overcast, the sun hidden behind thick clouds, and the world seemed to grow colder with each passing day. It was during this time that a young boy from the village, curious and brave, decided to seek out Yama Yurei. His grandmother had told him stories of the Ice Lady, and he believed that if he could find her, he could ask her to bring an end to the unrelenting winter. Armed with nothing but his courage, the boy set out into the mountains, determined to find the icy palace that no one had ever seen. The journey was perilous. The snow was deep, and the winds fierce, but the boy pressed on, driven by the hope that he could help his people. Days passed, and just as the boy was about to give up, he found himself at the foot of a towering glacier. It was there, in the shimmering ice, that he saw her. Yama Yurei, standing tall and regal, her icy hair flowing in the wind, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The boy called out to her, his voice weak against the howling wind. At first, she did not respond, her attention focused on something unseen. But as the boy drew closer, Yama Yurei turned her gaze upon him. Her eyes, as cold as the ice that surrounded her, softened for a moment. She knelt down, her fingers brushing the boy's cheek, and he felt a warmth that defied the cold. "You should not be here, child," she whispered, her voice like the wind itself. "The darkness is near." The boy, trembling with fear and awe, told her of the endless winter and how the villagers were suffering. Yama Yurei listened, her expression unreadable. She stood, her eyes narrowing as she looked towards the valley below. "The darkness has grown strong," she said quietly, "but I will fight it. For as long as I am here, it will not take this world." With that, Yama Yurei turned and disappeared into the storm, her form fading into the swirling snow. The boy, left alone in the freezing cold, felt a surge of hope. He hurried back to the village, his heart lighter despite the biting cold. When he returned, the villagers gathered around him, eager to hear what had happened. As he told them of his encounter with Yama Yurei, the wind began to die down, and the snow ceased to fall. That night, the sky cleared, and the stars shone brightly above the mountains. The villagers lit their candles, and for the first time in weeks, they stayed lit through the night. The darkness had been pushed back, and Yama Yurei had won once again. But her battle was far from over. For as long as the mountains stood, and as long as the darkness sought to rise, Yama Yurei would continue her vigil, her icy hair flowing in the wind, her presence felt in the cold embrace of winter. And so, the legend of the woman with hair of ice lived on, a reminder of the eternal struggle between light and darkness, and the frozen beauty that stood as a guardian of the world.